Picking up where we left off, last chapter of Burying the Boys, the CIA, the Mob, and America's Secret History. I just had to eat dinner. Excuse me. It was a total fluke he was caught. He was done in by a deer. Earlier, Velez had been stopped, questioned, and then released at the airport by those sharp dressers at the FBI. After escaping the freebie clutches of the FBI at the airport, Velez had hired a cab to drive him from New Orleans to Miami in the middle of the night in Mediterranean Mississippi. The cab hit a deer at a lonely gas station on the interstate. While waiting for repairs, a highway patrolman happened by and noticed that the surgical outfit worn by the cab's passenger fit the description released by Baton Rouge police of one of the triggermen. Officers immediately put Velez in handcuffs. The cabbie, irate at losing such a big fare, professed to the cops that he couldn't understand why the police were making such a fuss over a dead deer. The police then radioed two safe houses in Algiers, a steamy suburb of New Orleans, and nabbed Bernardo Vasquez and Luis Quintero Cruz. The other two men later convicted, as well as John Carnota, brother of the man fingered John Cardona, brother of the man fingered as at the trial, Rafa Cardona Salazar. Eliberto Sanchez was caught trying to flee the New Orleans International Airport. Jose Renteria was nabbed the next day while waiting to board a plane in Miami. The eighth man in the assassination is Jose Coutin, who had supplied the weapons for the hit. He is thus by law guilty of murder, or at the very least of conspiracy to murder. But being connected means never having to say you're sorry. Coutin was never even charged with a crime. He went on to testify before the Kerry Committee, saying no doubt anything his benefactors wanted him to say. Coutin was the proprietor of the Broadway boutique, a Miami fashion stop with a unique inventory, ladies' clothing in the front and military gear in the back. According to Leslie Cockburn in Out of Control, he was a well-known CIA asset, FBI informant, and Contra weapons supplier. Why Sanchez and Cardona were simply deported and never charged with murder has never, unsurprisingly, been satisfactorily explained. But what happened to Jose Renteria is revealing. Testimony at the trial of the three accused of killing Seal revealed that Renteria had been the cutout between Coutin, known to be linked to Oliver North, and the shooters, to whom he delivered the weapons from Coutin. So Jose Renteria's case was severed from the trial of the other three. It was the strangest thing, says attorney Sharpenstein. He was served on some odd theory that he wasn't at the murder scene. What really happened is he had indicated that he might, in exchange for a deal, be willing to talk. Someone on the government side was clearly not very eager for that to happen. According to trial testimony, it was Renteria who took pictures of the murder when his camera was confiscated by an FBI agent at the New Orleans airport. It was opened at the film inside exposed. Renteria was sent to Miami to face minor pending charges. His bosses must have felt that his had been a job well done. They cut him a deal. They made him a fast plea, and he was in and out, serving a bit of time and then being deported, states Sharpenstein. The result was we never got to hear the story he was ready to sing at the trial. And Coutin, same thing, Sharpenstein says. They made a deal with him. He testified at the trial, and later, before the Kerry hearings in Washington, I was the lawyer who brought up his CIA and Contra connections in the trial because I felt that there were lots of reasons why the CIA might want to murder Barry. And Coutin went crazy on the stand when I did. You'd have thought he'd been zapped with a ray gun. Had the Colombians discussed motive with their lawyers? They were just soldiers, Sharpenstein stated. They did what they were told, but in testimony at the trial given by one of Seal's attorneys, Louis Ungsby, we finally did hear about the motive. Louis Ungsby is today a prominent and very well-connected Louisiana lawyer. At the time, his name was daily on the front page of the state's newspaper, defending his longtime client and associate, Governor Edwin Edwards. Ungleby had told us about a confrontation he had with Barry over the fact that Seal was keeping him in the dark about matters Ungleby considered crucial to defending him. Barry pushed the phone across the desk to me and said, "You want to know what's going on? Here, dial this number. Tell him you're me," Ungleby related. When I did what he requested, he continues, a female voice answered the phone saying, "Vice President Bush's office, may I help you?" I said, "This is Barry Seal." She asked me to wait a while. She transferred the call, which was immediately picked up by a man who identified himself as Admiral somebody or other, who said to me, "Barry, where you been?" That's when I told him that I wasn't Barry Seal. I was his lawyer, said Ungleby. Immediately he slammed down the phone. So why was Barry Seal murdered? We asked Sharpenstein. Ungleby said he had been with Seal when the IRS came and seized all his property, Sharpenstein related. The IRS man said, "You owe us $30 million for the money you made in the drug dealing." "Hey, I work for you," was Seal's reply. "We work for the same people. You don't work for us," the IRS agent stated. "We're the IRS," Ungleby was with Seal when he retired to a back room, Sharpenstein stated. He watched as Seal placed a call to George Bush. He heard Barry Seal tell Bush, "If you don't get those IRS assholes off my back, I'm going to blow the whistle on the Contra scheme." Sharpenstein spoke solemnly, aware of the gravity of his words. "That's why he's dead," is what Ungleby said. 1 week after the phone conversation between Barry Seal and George Bush, Seal was sentenced to a halfway house. 2 weeks later, he was dead. Barry Seal, you mean? The agent that went bad, Gordon Novell, had casually inquired when we'd posed the question of his associations with Seal. An agent that goes bad, as we understand intelligence industry trade jargon, is one who contemplates talking. Seal was gunned down, supposedly by those Colombians, says Sharpenstein, but they were fed information by the assholes in our government who wanted him dead. The assassination of Barry Seal was very likely not even the first attempt on Seal's life by North, we were told by CIA electronics expert Red Hall, on the ground in Nicaragua with Seal on the Sandinista drug sting. The only thing I knew was the CIA had a lot to do with it, Barry's murder. The killers were being directed by Oliver North at the time. It was the same thing Oliver North pulled on us down in Nicaragua. Then I didn't know yet that Oliver North had it for Barry Seal because he was working with Oliver at that particular point. Oh boy, I lost my place. I'm just gonna have to start over. The only thing I knew was the CIA had a lot to do with it. Barry's murder. The killers were being directed by Oliver North at the same time. It was the same thing Oliver North pulled on us down in Nicaragua. Then I didn't know yet that Oliver North had it for Barry Seal because he was working with Oliver at that particular point. We was undercover, and we were still down there in Nicaragua when Oliver North blew the whistle on us. Chip Tatum, another covert operative who had known Seal and shared confidences with him, listened with amusement the first time we breathlessly relayed what we'd discovered, that Oliver North is guilty in the assassination of Barry Seal. "No shit, Sherlock," he replied, laughing. "It ain't exactly the secret of the century, I can tell you." Barry Seal had threatened George Bush over the IRS trouble he was having. Why couldn't Bush have taken care of the IRS? Perhaps he could have. But there were other Seal problems as well, like state police so disgusted that they were threatening to go to the media with damning evidence of official corruption in Seal's case. Should the biggest drug smuggler any of them had ever seen receive no time at all? Al Capone killed over 500 people. What did he go to prison for? Asked one state former police official. We remembered tax evasion. Exactly, tax evasion. Get the picture? I beat on desktops in the IRS offices all across the United States to find somebody that would take that case, till I found a criminal investigator for the IRS named Earl Buck Holmes, willing to come down and set up a war room in my office. Some wised up. Local and state cops had figured out that Barry Seal had been too valuable to certain people in the federal government of the United States of America to ever go to prison for his crimes. Knowing this, local law enforcement had done an end around on them and taken their case to the IRS, where they hatched a plan to at least strip Seal of some of his ill-gotten goods. Remarkably, in the court proceedings in neither Miami nor Baton Rouge had Seal's organizational assets, like his fleet of planes, been confiscated, although this is standard operating procedure in drug cases. Why not? Because they were still being used. Local and state cops, we found to our amazement, had tracked a shipment of cocaine to one of Seal's ocean-going vessels, the Captain Wonderful. Just weeks before Seal's murder, they were met and dissuaded from boarding by DEA and CIA agents. State and local cops in the South often appear to know the score. When we told one Louisiana law enforcement source what we had learned from Miami attorney Richard Sharpenstein about how the hit team had been going, about how the hit team had been getting orders from Oliver North, he said simply, "That doesn't surprise me at all." Then we discovered why Seal had been so unconcerned about being killed by the Medellin cartel. I asked Barry, why wasn't he worried about the Colombians killing him, stated close associate mob pilot Reen Martin. He said he told the Colombians he was going to jail to pull a fast one and testify for Ochoa against the U.S. government. 2 weeks before he died, Barry Seal had hired a private investigator in Miami, Steve Dinerstein, to run FAA title searches on 15 different airplanes he had used in his smuggling enterprise. Seal was getting ready to talk about who had owned his smuggling fleet 15 years ago. Barry Seal was assassinated because he was getting ready to talk. He had even contacted Paramount Studios production vice president about making a movie. While the killers approached Barry Seal's Cadillac in Baton Rouge, twilight, Seal had been on his car phone with a CIA aircraft procurement executive in Arizona, Bill Lambeth, who will himself be murdered in Phoenix 7 years later. Suddenly cut off and fearing the worst, Lambeth frantically dialed Barry's home phone, where his wife Debbie answered. "I think something's wrong with Barry," Lambeth said ominously. Debbie, unable to reach her husband, bundled her 3 small children into the car and frantically headed for the Salvation Army halfway house, where he had been sentenced to sleep for 6 months. On the way, she stopped at a payphone to make another attempt to reach her husband and learned he was now unreachable. "He's not going to the hospital," she remembers being told. "He's dead. Don't come here, Debbie. Don't." As she returned to her car, she could see through her tears, her 3 small children's heads barely peeking over the car's seats. And though Barry Seal is anything but blameless, his 3 small children they symbolized the millions of lives ruined by a phony drug war whose only purpose is to line still more the pockets of a crew of elite deviants who took over our country. "All I could think of was my poor little babies, and my poor babies," Debbie Seal told us, choking back tears. "I didn't know how I was going to tell them that their daddy was dead." We were to make one final discovery. After Barry Seal had threatened to roll on Richard Benveniste, and while he was still in possession of those 2 briefcases filled with incriminating information he had liberated from Benveniste's office, Benveniste had interceded for Seal and set up a meeting with the then Vice President of the United States, George Bush. We learned that Seal had not attended this meeting. Instead, he sent the Attorney General for the state of Louisiana, William J. Gouste, Jr., to argue on his behalf. The Vice President of the United States, George Bush, sat down and cut a deal with the Attorney General of the state of Louisiana in what amounted to state-to-state negotiations about the fate of a Louisiana native CIA agent with a little problem, Barry Seal. The result, which we already knew, was that Seal had moved his operation to Mena in the spring of 1982 and went to work for Oliver North. But who was William Gouste? Why had Seal placed such faith in him? And the answer, when we found it, brought our story of Barry and the boys full circle. William Gouste Jr., in addition to involvement with Edwin Edwards in shady casino deals, Standard Louisiana Fare had been, way back in 1956 and 57, when our story began, the head of the New Orleans Metropolitan Crime Commission, where he had been instrumental in bringing to town Guy Bannister, the agent who helmed the entire New Orleans operation from its inception. Small world. At the Baton Rouge funeral home, where mourners gathered for Barry Seal's wake, the newly widowed Debbie Seal's oldest childhood friend noticed with curiosity an entire line of men in sleek dark suits hovering at the back door of the room. Who are they? She asked Debbie. They're with the government, Debbie replied. They've come to make sure that he's dead. This has been the story of Barry Seal, the biggest drug smuggler in American history, who died in a hail of bullets with George Bush's private phone number in his wallet. And that's it. There's only a bunch of pictures now. I guess Barry is a boy. I'm only going to do this for a few pictures because there's a lot of pictures. That doesn't even have anything with it, so. 16-year-old Baton Rouge Civil Air Patrol cadet Barry Seal boards U.S. Air Force plane on July 23, 1955, to fly a 2-week training camp at Barksdale Air Force Base in Shreveport, Louisiana, where he will meet fellow cadet Lee Harvey Oswald from New Orleans, and both will fall under the sway of CIA agent and pedophile Captain David Ferry. I think that might be Ferry. I haven't read it yet. Yeah, David Ferry. That's it. Come back next time.